Okay, for Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated, I'm Brendan Gulick along with Brett Hiltbrand breaking down Ohio State's 92-82 victory over the Penn State Nittany Lions on Thursday night in Happy Valley. Brett, that's the kind of game that you really need a giant exhale at the end, because you want to talk about a roller coaster ride, some awfully streaky runs both ways. And for a good little while there, beginning of the second half, things looked like they were slipping away. The Buckeyes did it again. They ripped off 15 straight points and came right back in it. And wouldn't you know it, got it rolling enough the rest of the way to put Penn State away and avoid an upset.
I think it was over 4 minutes and 40-some seconds. They go on that 15-0, 15-1 run that they were actually down at the start of it, and then ended up with a pretty sizable lead that they obviously never gave back. I was struck by the opportunity to listen to Chris Holtmann and his post-game thoughts with how tired he looks. I think he used the word survive at one point, and he's like, "Yeah, it's exactly how we feel as we survived that one," and that's what you're getting at right now with this current kind of uber competitive kind of streak that we're getting from Big Ten basketball, and that we've gotten now for the last maybe 5-8 years.
And it's amazing because it almost feels like he and the rest of his staff are feeling the weight of, frankly, this winning streak. They've now won 7 in a row and 10 of 11. The team's 18-4. They're 12-4 in league play. And again, for a team that started the season as the preseason, seventh best team in the league, in the eyes at least of the media and the coaches. They've obviously achieved at a really high level this year. But I thought tonight's game was a perfect example of why this can be such an exhausting endeavor in the Big Ten this year. You're playing a Penn State team that really didn't shoot the ball very well at all against either Michigan State or Nebraska. They lost to Nebraska, who hadn't won any of their previous 26 games in the league. And Penn State comes off a loss, and then what do they do right out of the gate? They shoot like 60% the first 10 minutes of the game, right? So it just feels like there's never a breath of fresh air where you can think, okay, we got this game. We're not gonna have a problem. This is gonna be an easier win. Those games just don't exist in this league this year.
No, they don't. And we actually talked about that the last time, we went live here previewing this game, where, we kind of floated the question a little bit about whether or not it's good to keep getting tested night in and night out, as opposed to having a game where you're, a little bit more in cruise control and you don't feel like you just ran a marathon or two, when it's over. And I kind of wonder a little bit about the legs of this Ohio State team. You heard Chris Holtmann say after the game that they're really banged up right now. And he said, quote, "We need a good day in the training room tomorrow," which I think, they're not the only ones that are dealing with it. Obviously, everyone in college basketball at this point in the season is probably a little bit leg weary, if you will. But I mean, I think it could be somewhat problematic given the teams that Ohio State has coming up in its near future, with Illinois and Iowa and Michigan. But I think, as you pulled up here the box score, I think the thing that helps this here is you saw Ohio State go, I want to say 9 deep in the bench with some sizable minutes, and that's absolutely huge to be able to kind of spread out some of the production and maybe not lose a whole lot with going that far deep into the bench. That's pretty big.
I mean, think about what Dwayne Washington did in the second half. He had 15 points after E.J. Liddell went, bananas in the first half and picked up 2 fouls within less than 3 minutes of the second half starting. And Liddell's minutes and frankly, even when he was on the floor, his impact was negated a bit in the second half. I just thought Dwayne Washington tonight had – I'm kind of stepping out on a limb here, but maybe his most efficient night all season. 6 of 9 shooting, didn't miss a foul shot, 4 of 5 from deep. He rarely looked out of control. His shots were in rhythm. It felt like tonight was almost the ceiling for Dwayne Washington. And yet again, it happens when Ohio State needs it most, when their backs are against the wall. They played a lot of Musa Jallow tonight, which I thought was interesting. We didn't see as much of Justice Sueing tonight. 22 minutes is still impactful, but boy, Jallow played a lot. And there were times where, Jallow's defense was a bit of a liability. I know you and I texted back and forth during the game. He's got to get better on that end of the floor, but still Jallow had a couple of good plays here and there. And of course, CJ Walker at playing 30 minutes, even though he didn't start, Walker had an above average game tonight. So when Liddell got in trouble after the scorching hot first half he had, the Buckeyes found other ways to claw their way back in.
Yeah, when Chris Holtman and the coaching staff goes back and evaluates this game, there are two big things that I think they'll take away from it. The first one is they're not going to love some of the defensive rotations that they had in this game. I thought, especially with Musa Jallow, maybe got exposed at times with some really bad closeouts and some really bad rotations. That I think is something that's correctable. But I also think it speaks to, what you just said, right? Where you can still have some breakdowns and go out and get a victory. And I think the other thing that speaks especially to that was what I thought was I would say a somewhat interesting plan that actually worked out from Penn State, where they were doubling basically that first pass and all of the bigs for Ohio State, basically forcing you to make two good passes out of that double to get a layup or a dunk. And Ohio State really couldn't do it, or didn't do it very well at times for the majority of the game, in fact. And yet they still were able to go out and score 90-some points, which I think is pretty spectacular when you think about it. It was one of those games where I felt like, with a little bit more crisp passing, and certainly maybe like a one more type pass from Ohio State, they could have scored probably somewhere in the range of maybe like 10 to 12 more points tonight, basically off of all dunks or layups. Like that was there with two good looks out of a double. But the harassing and then the ball pressure that the Penn State Nittany Lions had on the defense end of the floor was pretty special tonight. And I think, and once again, it speaks to what Penn State is able to do every single time. It seems like when they play Ohio State, which is it rise to the absolute top of their ceiling and their potential.
Yeah, I don't know why, but playing Penn State, we talked about this in our preview yesterday. Playing Penn State used to not be a very, notable game on the schedule. Nope. And look, they're 7-11, but they have the number 2 strength of schedule in the country. It's not like they've played nobody and are under 500. They are competitive, obviously. The Buckeyes have played them fairly tight now, both times they've met. But it's like playing this team, for whatever reason, in the last few years has felt more like, a trip to the dentist office than it has to Disney World, where like, you're sitting there like, okay, have to figure out a way to put the pieces of the puzzle together the right way, because I don't understand why Penn State stopped giving the ball inside to John Harrah. Like he was a dominant force when he was on the floor. Now he picked up, eventually 5 fouls in the later part of the second half, but they kind of stopped involving him in the offense. And I know they've got good guard play, but to me, I look at this Penn State team and think they could be a lot better than they are.
I agree. The ball pressure got a little bit better, and I think it made some of those entries a little bit more difficult. But, I mean, you heard Len on the broadcast basically screaming at the TV going, give it to him, give it to him. Like, right. And I think if you're a Penn State fan watching at home, you were probably doing the same thing while wondering if you could throw your remote through the TV. Because there were at times where, that look is absolutely there. And when it was working as well as it had previously, I'm not really sure exactly why they went away from it. But I think that's part of the ebb and flow of basketball. And I think that's also what happens when you maybe don't have a team that's used to winning, or certainly against a team that's not used to winning against, the upper echelon, teams both, nationwide and in your conference. I think Jim Ferry's got the job. He's technically an interim tag right now for Penn State, but I think if you're looking at the way they've played, especially in the last, say, 6 to 7 weeks, I don't think you could say you would want anything less out of this group, right?
No, I agree.
But I feel like I'm a broken record every time we talk about Ohio State basketball when it comes to this situation. Like this was another game where they got thrown a wrinkle. That doubling, and then being forced to find 2 good looks out of that double to get an easy shot, a good look, or 2 good passes out of the double, get a good look at the hoop. And they weren't maybe able to do that as efficiently as they liked, and yet they still scored 90 points and got a win. Like they can play anyway, right? Like This team it does not matter in some ways how you defend them, they're going to go out, and as long as they are not ice cold from everywhere, if they're shooting in the low 30s, high 20s. As long as that doesn't happen, you are going to struggle to beat this Ohio State team because of how efficient they are and how varied they are offensively.
And I'm impressed with their maturity on the offensive end to not settle. I mean, time and time again, the Buckeyes, if they get in a tough spot offensively, if the shot clock is winding down, if they can't work the ball into the key, it just feels like they're not waiting for, okay, maybe this is the best shot we're going to get and we take it. It feels like there's just this urgency to keep looking for something better. And because they're not star-studded or so reliant on 1 or 2 players, even if E.J. Liddell and Dwayne Washington have, the upside that they've shown, they don't seem to force it to any one guy. So they're willing to work the ball around it. And I think that helps negate some of the crazy ebbs and flows that your offense can get sucked into a drought and find no way to work its way out of. Justin Arns is a great example. Arns hit, what was it, the second 3-pointer of the game tonight, and you felt the weight of his impact on the floor when the entire defense instantly shifted his way as soon as he touched the ball. And the time prior to that, when it had happened, he passed back to Dwayne Washington up at the top of the arc, who hit a rhythm 3, and they were off and rolling. Arns hit 3 threes in the first half. Of course, one of them beat the buzzer. But you really feel and appreciate the different things that this offense brings to the table. And I mean, they were at almost 1.4 points per possession tonight. That is ludicrous how effective they were and how efficient they were offensively.
Yeah, and I would guess with the exception of the first maybe like 90 seconds to first two minutes of the second half.
Yep.
They were probably scoring at a higher rate than that per possession. And that, I would guess, that stretch actually dropped the average, was maybe a little bit of an outlier if you take those 2 minutes out of it. Now, obviously, that's a big chunk. That's about 5% of the game. But I think the efficiency stuff is just, I don't know what you do. I straight up, outside of like hoping they just don't shoot it well, which Ohio State's proved that that's not really an option. You're basically just going to have to try and get into a shootout with them. And I don't think there are too many teams in the country that are capable of doing that, period, point blank.
Well, and not for as well as Ohio State takes care of the ball.
Right, and they're deep into the shot clock too. That's the other thing.
92 points in 66 possessions. That's really, really hard to do unless you take a whole bunch of foul shots. And the Buckeyes got to the free throw line a lot in the second half. They only shot, I think it was 9 first half free throws. They shot 17 in the second half when all of a sudden the referees got kind of whistle happy. it was a very different game in the second half than it was early on. But this team has shown a mental toughness that is awfully impressive, and I hesitate to say how far they can go in the tournament, but their consistency is getting awfully rare, and there are not many teams in the country that are playing with this same level of consistency.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think to your point, that one of the big reasons why I think the consistency is there both at both ends of the floor is how, and this is more of like a question for like the analytics people, because I don't have this number off the top of my head. This is more of like a feel situation. I would guess they take the overwhelming majority of their shots in the back half of their possession, meaning like the last half of the shot clock. And that does two things. One, it ensures that there are multiple passes, multiple guys get touches every single possession, which I think just does wonders for keeping guys in the game offensively. And I think that's changed a little bit, in terms of, the overall kind of basketball coaching philosophy offensively. But it also just limits possessions and the amount of time opponents have to go out and score. And that's one of the reasons why I think the idea of like getting into a shootout with Ohio State maybe doesn't totally work, because you then have to, if they're scoring at their efficiency average, which is absolutely elite, chances are you have to score above that, above your own average as a team, just to keep pace with them, let alone go out and try and beat them with, by the way, less time than you're probably accustomed to having per possession, or at least possession in reference to the actual game clock, shot clock to game clock. So, I mean, they are built in maybe the best way that we've seen from an Ohio State team tournament-wise in a really, really long time. I think, if we're talking about like how far can they go, man, I mean, how could you not have like sky-high expectations after everything that we've seen the last month and change?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, it's going to come down to a matchup of whether or not Ohio State ends up seeing a team with post players, the likes of Travion Williams and Zach Edey at Purdue, where obviously that was a challenge. Now, that's not to say the Buckeyes haven't beaten teams with good post presences this year. They've certainly done that, and they're going to get another really good dose of it on Sunday with Michigan, with Hunter Dickinson coming to town. But it's going to come down to matchups when you get to the tournament. We'll see how it goes.
I would actually not be surprised, by the way, to just kind of expand on that point. The one thing that I think could give them problems is length, and length gives everybody issues in college basketball. If a team does have length and they're able to apply the same amount of ball pressure that we saw from Penn State when they doubled that first pass, that is something that I think, if you're talking about teams evaluating and scouting Ohio State, we might see that more in the future, a little bit, forcing Ohio State to be a little bit more efficient with passes out of that double team and then finding the ball to the opposite side of the floor, for sure.
Biggest takeaway from tonight is your final thought. What positive, negative, could be about the Buckeyes, could be about Penn State, but what was your most impactful takeaway from the game?
I'll give you two. I'll give you a good one and let's say like an eyebrow raise type one. The eyebrow raise is the legs. I'm officially keeping an eye on that one. I think we have to have a finger a little bit on the pulse of that one. I think that's something to watch as it affects Ohio State. I would say not even this next game, the one after that. That's the one I think we got to look at a little bit as far as how we see Ohio State's legs when it comes to not the Michigan game, but Michigan State here, I think, on the 25th, maybe. I'm not exactly sure.
Yes, 1 week from tonight, Thursday.
But the schedule's loading right now. It's taking too long. Yeah, the 25th. So that's something to keep an eye on. And I think we saw that at times a little bit with some specific guys, more specifically the bigs at Ohio State. The good thing is the main takeaway is once again, I'm blown away by the efficiency numbers. And I think it's if you watch this team and you're an Ohio State fan who's really kind of wondering how to feel about this team in terms of tournament expectations, the fact that you're seeing the efficiency numbers consistently now over an extended stretch, we have a lot of data that is backing up kind of what we're seeing, right? You have to feel really good. And once again, efficient out the wazoo tonight. And that's incredible to watch. And you should be really excited about what this team can do come tourney time.
Since I echo a lot of those thoughts, I'm going to take it a different direction. We haven't said his name once. Boy, this team really needs Seth Towns. It was very apparent beginning of the year when Seth was not able to get on the floor, or when he was playing such limited minutes, from where that team was in November, December to where they are now, since Towns, has been able to give Ohio State, close to double-digit minutes a game, with relative frequency. He's made such a big impact on this team. And clearly, for whatever reason, his knee didn't look 100% tonight when he tweaked it during the game. Really hope that, he's going to be available, because I think Sunday this team could really use him. Not much.
He tweeted that he was okay after the game, maybe about 10 minutes ago. But that's a player talking. We'll see what
I'm sure he's okay. Mentally, he's going to will himself to be okay.
Absolutely.
And he's not going to let coach take him off the floor. But when he gets in the game, if he's not an asset when he's out there, right, against a team like Michigan, you can't afford to keep him out there. So I think Buckeye Nation right now is crossing their fingers pretty hard that Seth Towns is going to be okay. And he's obviously been dealing with this all year long, and I'm sure he's got games where he feels better and some games where he doesn't. But hopefully whatever bothered him tonight was not going to be a long-term impact on this team. 92-82, the final score tonight. A really impressive win, a gutsy win. The Buckeyes were down at one point, 59-51. And then over a 6.5-minute stretch, they ripped off a 20-5 run and took command of this game and never really looked back. E.J. Liddell, the leading scorer. Dwayne Washington had more than 20. And the Buckeyes have now won 7 in a row and 10 of 11 to go to 18-4 on the season, 12-4 in Big Ten play. Of course, Sunday is the big game against Michigan. We'll have plenty of preview coverage for you on BuckeyesNow.com, as well as our YouTube channel right here. We hope you'll subscribe to our content and come back regularly, and look forward to seeing you again on Sunday. For Brett Hiltbrand, I'm Brendan Gulick. See you again next time here on Buckeyes Now.